Hello everybody, Steven here from Cardboard Coalition, and today we figured we'd bring you a a setup and how to play as usual of Santorini, New York from Roxley and Spin Games. This is for ages 8+, it's 2 to 5 players, and nowhere on the box does it say time, because it could vary depending on how well you play off each other and things like that. So let's go ahead and jump into the setup. First off, the youngest player is the first player. That player chooses a color. Once they've chosen their color, you give them their 2 people for that color, and you give them their color card. I can't remember exactly the name of it. It's player color card. I just glanced at it. Player color card. So it helps you remember what your color is. All right, so once the players, starting with the youngest, who's the first player, pick their color, they get their people and their color card, and everybody does it. And like I said, you can play this up to 5. The next thing that you want to do is, it doesn't say you want the board out, obviously, to play on, so the board's out. But the next thing you do is you put out all these building pieces. These are your basic building levels. These are your roofs. And then you have the Statue of Liberty, and then you have your skyscrapers. So you go ahead and you put all these things out on the table ready to go. Once you do that, you create your deck of cards. Now, it tells you in the manual what cards to use to start off with, and that's the ones we're using. And you have an engineer, a builder, a specialist, and a mover. So this is the engineer, this is the builder, this is the specialist, and this is the mover. Now the game comes with a variety of builders, specialists, and movers to put variety in the game. There's only one engineer that comes in the game, at least the base box, and that's what we have here is the base box of the game. So once you go ahead and you get those cards, and we have them right here. Bump the camera a little bit, but it's okay. Once you get those cards, you go ahead and put them in a stack. Then you put out their reference cards. These cards over here are literally just reference cards. They explain what it shows you on the actual card. Wow, I didn't shuffle these very well, but it just explains what it shows you on the card. For instance, we got the builder, right? And the builder says you build, you move, you build on a second level. Let's see what it says here. It says your build. So on your build turn, you must build 2 different spaces. So you have to be able to build 2 different spaces. That's what the builder does. And then you have the engineer, which gives you, shows you building a building. And then it has this kind of thing. That's Statue of Liberty. That's if you are basically the winner. That's usually what the peace olive branches mean. But it means if you have the highest number, or you can win if you have the Statue of Liberty and you build a roof, right? You put a cap. I always call them caps. You put a roof on a building. Now, looking at that, you might be like, what the heck, scratching your head? And that's why you have these reference cards. And it says, start your turn. Before moving your worker, if possible, build a skyscraper. If possible, build a skyscraper, I can say this. If possible, build a skyscraper on one neighboring ground level. So what that's saying is you build a skyscraper, right? Before you even move, you put down a skyscraper. And that's why you have those skyscrapers there. So these are just reference cards. They also tell you how many cards are of each type. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 engineer cards in the deck. And it tells you the numbers, and we'll talk about why that's important later. So you get your reference cards out, you've gotten all your cards, and you put them in the deck, and you give it a shuffle. As you saw, I didn't give it a very good shuffle. Right? Whew. Now I'm dropping cards. So you give it a shuffle, then you give 5 cards to each player, right? So I've already given each player 5 cards, and then you put these down here, which makes up the discard pile, face down, which is a little weird for any of you guys who are people who play games regularly. Usually discards face up. In this game, the discard is face down. All right. So now we have the game completely set up. Now we go through player turns. Well, sorry, it's not completely set up. Let's before we get into player turns. So the first thing you want to do is you want to place your workers. And that goes with the youngest player. And we'll say white's the youngest player. They pick a spot on the board, they place their worker. Then the next person goes, they place their worker. And if you have more people, they go through, place your worker, same way clockwise from the youngest, the first player through. Once you do that, once you have all your players on, then it starts the play phase, right? That's completely set up. At the beginning, you kind of do that, but now it's play phase. And what you do to play this game is first you pick a card, and you have these right here that tell you what to do, all right? It tells you, let's see if I can get it to focus. There we go. It tells you place a card face down. All players reveal simultaneously. Next, highest number takes the Statue of Liberty. 3 from the lowest to highest, players take turns. So that's your quick reference guide, and that's literally how you play the game. So you pick a card, you go, what do I want to do? I'm going to play that. You put it face down until everybody picks their cards. All right? Everyone, let's pick one here. I'm just going to go randomly. We're going to put it face down. All right? Once everybody at the table has done that, then you simultaneously flip your cards over. All right? Once you flip your cards over, you look for who has the highest number. And in this case, we have black has a 10. So you get the numbers from this corner right here. All right, so it's basically the numbers, what the person is, a picture of the person, and this is what you are supposed to do with that card, what the card's asking you to do. So since 10 is higher than 5, 10 is the highest, they get the Statue of Liberty. And the Statue of Liberty bounces back and forth, if there's more players, it bounces around. It'll bounce around depending on who has the highest number, right? So 10's the highest, they get the Statue of Liberty. Then you go into your play move. And what you do is you move and then you build, right? First you move, then you build. So white would go first, and let's say they decide to move here because they want to get away from that black player, and they build. Now, you're also supposed to do what the card tells you to do. So for the NYPD officer, it shows this at the bottom is what you're supposed to do. Move up on a building and push whoever's up on the building back 1. All right? And you might say, oh, I don't know what that means. And hence the reference card. So you can look at the reference card and it tells us your move. Your worker may move into an opponent worker space. If you can force their worker, it should be a comma there, sorry. If you can, force your worker 1 space straight backwards. So what it's saying is 1, and this is very important, 1 is that you may do this, all right? And 2, the thing that it's saying is if there was a worker up here, I can move up to this space and push this worker back 1, right? And then if that was the move, then I would build something somewhere, right? So, but just keep in mind it says if, right? Or may. Right? It says, or no, this one says if you can. So some of them say may. Some cards tell you you have to do something. For instance, the mover says you have to move north, south, east, west. And you have the directions on here. Because in this game, you can move to any spot. So if you started, let's go back to it. Let's say you started here. I could move to any of these locations. I can move orthogonally and I can move diagonally. But for the actual subway operator, you have to move orthogonally, right? But it tells you have to move, well, north here, north, south, east, west. I had to think about it for a second because I have it all spun around. So that's doing your card things. Sometimes you have to do it and sometimes you may or if and things like that. So let's say we've gone ahead and taken our turn. We've moved and we did that. Now the next player goes ahead and takes their turn. And what their card says is you you must build in 2 different spaces. And how I read this, and maybe I'm wrong, but I read it as you have to build something, and you can build in any of these spaces, so you can go diagonally and orthogonally. Then you must move, and then you must build again. So with that worker, with this card, you have to build twice. And we'll get into how you lose workers, and it goes into the winning conditions in a minute. But you have to follow the cards. So now, once all players have gone, they take their cards, they go ahead and put them in the discard pile, and it starts all over again. And I'm just going to randomly do it this time. So let's just grab a card. You don't want to. You would want to look at your cards. So let's randomly grab a card for each player. All right. Same thing. Once all players have picked their cards, they simultaneously flip over. So we got the NYPD officer again and another NYPD officer. This time, and it worked out for me, this time white is the highest. So the Statue of Liberty moves over to white. And then black would be able to go first, and then you move again. And you can move either worker. You can't split your moves, but you can move either worker. And it's always move, build. And then the cards will give you variety. If you've played the original Santorini, it's the God cards that allow you to have special abilities. This does something a little different. I'll talk about it in the review. So basically they have the Statue of Liberty, then you go through all your turns again. Now, how do you get into end phase? How do you win this game? To win this game, there's a couple things that need to happen, right? I'm just trying to set this up really quick so you guys can see how it would work. One way to win this game is to make it to the 3rd level. Let's see if I can tilt it so you guys can see. The 3rd level of a building and have the Statue of Liberty in hand. That's one way to win. So, how you get to the 3rd building is obviously by building these things. You could never move up more than 1 level. So let's say I didn't have this here. I could never go up. This one's 2 levels, so you guys can see. I could never move up 2 levels. I could only move up 1 level. So that's why I said it like this. So 1 level, 1 level, 1 level, right? So to win, you would have to be on the 3rd level of a building, and you would have to have the Statue of Liberty. The other way to win is to, and you basically have to have the card. Let's see if I can find one who has an engineer. I think someone had an engineer. There we go. So let's go like this. I know I'm swapping around. Hopefully it doesn't confuse you guys a little bit. But there's the old engineer. This tells you to build a skyscraper. But with the engineer, there's an extra win condition that you can do. Have the Statue of Liberty and build a top on a building. And it could be anybody's building. You could be over here. You could be trying to stop black from, let's say they've built a 3rd and they want to jump on it. You know their next turn they're going to jump on it. If you have this card out, right? If white has this card out, they can move here because it has to be adjacent. Oh no, actually they could be right here. It has to be adjacent. And they could put a cap on top of this. Now what this says is if you have the Statue of Liberty and you put the roof, the cap, however you want to look at it, on a building, and you can only put it on 3rd stories, you win. So Statue of Liberty, put a building on a 3rd story, yours or someone else's, you win. And so that is the basic way that you play this game. You move and you build. Now there's one last win condition. You can lose your characters, right? Your workers. And how that happens is you can't legally, neither of your guys, because you have 2 guys on the table, they can't move and build. You always have to move and build. And the other thing is, if your card tells you you have to do something specific, like the movers, I think they're called the movers. Is that what that group's called? I can't remember now. Yes, the movers. It tells you which way you have to move, right? If it tells you have to move north, south, east, or west, and you can't move, neither of your workers can move that direction, then you lose a worker. If they cannot do what the card says, if the card says you must, they cannot do it, they lose a worker. If they cannot move and build, neither of them can move and build, you lose a worker. If you are the only one left with workers on the board, that's how you win. So the 3 ways to win is to get to the top level, have the Statue of Liberty in hand, in your possession, you win, right? The other way is have the Statue of Liberty and build a cap on a 3rd story, right? You put a roof on a 3rd story, then you could win. That's the second way. The third way is if you are the only person left, you're the only person that has workers left on the board. And those are the 3 ways that you can win the game. Now, just to clarify a couple things, on your turn, you can move either worker, right? And just remember, move, build, and then follow whatever the card tells you to do. And some of them are ifs or mays. Some of them you have to do, right? The other thing is you can move down 2 spaces without penalty. You can only move up 1, and it's always diagonal, but you can move down 2 spaces. That's okay. You never want to move down 3 because if you're already at the 3rd space, then you win. Unless the police officer, let's say black's here, they have the police officer, they could jump up here and knock you down, right? And then you don't die, you just get knocked down. And if they have the Statue of Liberty, they would win, right? So remember, you can fall down any number of spaces. You can only move up 1 space at a time, right? You can only move up 1 level at a time, but you can move down any amount of levels. And that's basically how you play Santorini, New York. It's a very simple game. It's one of those games where they tell you simple to teach, simple to learn, a lifetime to master. I find that, and I've played this a few times now, and I found that there are a lot of things that you can do. You can use these buildings if you're wondering why you would put these on the map. It's really to try to block your opponent from being able to do stuff, right? Trying to block them in if you can do it. That's where the buildings come in handy. So there is a lot of strategy involved in this. And when I play with Resvon, at least we've played the original Santorini and the expansion, which just gives you more options, is you could win by trying to block your opponent in corners, especially in a 2-player. In a 4-player, it probably gets a little crazier. But you can win by trying to stop your opponent from doing things and having just enough time to move your last move up onto that 3rd level. So there is a lot of strategy. I was going to say strategery, Homer Simpson. There is a lot of strategy in this game, but this is basically how you play. At first, it looks like it might be a lot. Remember, these are just reference cards. All it's about is putting down a card, revealing that card. Whoever's the highest gets the Statue of Liberty. Then you go, lowest player moves first, and it's move and build. And then you have those win conditions. Statue of Liberty on the 3rd level. Statue of Liberty, put a roof on a 3rd level. If you have the engineer card, you have to have that card to be able to do that. Or be the last person with workers on the board. And that is how you play Santorini, New York. And I know I just kind of went back over everything again. But that's basically how you play. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Steven with Cardboard Coalition. See you later, everybody. Bye.